The alarm goes off at 6 in the morning. You slept 8 hours. You drank no alcohol. You followed every protocol. Modern productivity culture has told you is sufficient. Yet your first step across the cold floor feels like lifting wet concrete. The weight is not in your legs. It is behind the sternum. The coffee fails. The weekend offers zero recovery. Even 3 months of carefully planned time away leaves the reservoir completely untouched. This is not biological fatigue. Your muscles are intact. Your blood work is clean. Your doctor has no diagnosis. It is your inner substance draining through a silent puncture, one that has no name in the vocabulary of performance culture. Carl Jung called this state the quiet loss of the soul, not the dramatic collapse, not the visible breakdown, the slow, invisible hollowing that happens while you continue to function at full capacity. In this archive, we examine the hidden anatomy of this erosion and the stoic discipline required to seal the breach before the structure collapses entirely. Modern culture treats exhaustion as a math problem, a deficit of hours or calories or sunlight that can be corrected with a better spreadsheet. More sleep, better supplements, an extra week in the sun. The wellness industry generates $400 billion annually selling the promise that the hollowing can be refilled from the outside. Yet the weight remains. Because what is leaving is not a caloric deficit. It is something that no supplement has ever been designed to address. There is a fundamental difference between exertion and erosion, and modern culture has deliberately collapsed the two into a single word, exhaustion, because the distinction is economically inconvenient. Exertion happens when you build something real, a cabinet, a proof, a defense. The body aches, the hands blister, the mind goes quiet at night. But the core feels solid because the output carries the weight of your actual will. Erosion happens when you trade 8 hours of vital force for frictionless corporate theater, for status updates that update nothing, for alignment meetings that align no one, for the performance of productivity in service of results you stopped believing in 18 months ago. A senior systems architect with 7 years inside enterprise finance documented his collapse not in a hospital room, but in a Reddit thread titled simply, "Why am I so tired when nothing is wrong?" He arrived on time. He hit every performance benchmark. His team received company-wide commendations. His manager considered him one of the most reliable people in the organization. Yet every email he typed felt like writing a eulogy for his own mind. He described it as performing surgery on a patient he had already watched die, but keeping the operation going for the benefit of the audience in the gallery. He was not tired from the workload. He was hollowing from the performance, from the sustained, daily act of presenting a self he no longer inhabited to people who had never asked to meet the real one. When the mask consumes the face, the mind shuts down its surplus energy. The laughter stops sounding genuine. The enthusiasm refuses to arrive before the occasion. Even the hunger for the weekend evaporates. The body refuses to generate energy for a life it does not inhabit. It is not malfunctioning, it is communicating with devastating precision. The surface anatomy is clear. The underlying mechanism was identified a century ago by a Swiss psychiatrist working along Lake Zurich, and its diagnostic power has never decayed. In 1933, Carl Gustav Jung began documenting a pattern he had observed in a specific class of patient that he could not explain through standard clinical models. They were successful physicians, lawyers, factory directors, and industrialists. None of them suffered from any diagnosable condition. Their blood pressure was normal. Their sleep was adequate. Their families considered them admirable. Yet they felt completely dead. They sat across from Jung and described a persistent, sourceless depletion, as though an invisible valve somewhere in the chest had been left open for years, and whatever had been inside had finally run dry. The ancient desert monks identified this phenomenon 15 centuries before modern psychology opened its first clinic. ken o dox ea, kenodoxia, from the Greek kenos, empty, and doxa, opinion. The relentless pursuit of hollow glory, building a life out of other people's approval rather than your own inner substance. Jung named this social mask the persona, the Latin term for the theatrical masks Roman actors wore so the amphitheater audience could instantly recognize the role. A functional interface is necessary to navigate society, close deals, and avoid unnecessary friction. The danger arrives when the mask is worn so continuously across so many years that you forget which side is the disguise and which is your actual face. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. Jung observed that what is neglected in the core does not vanish. It retreats into the unconscious shadow. When you force yourself through 8 hours of artificial performance, your suppressed reality builds a counter-pressure. Jung called this dynamic enantiodromia, the inevitable law that everything eventually turns into its exact opposite. The energy you refuse to invest in your genuine life turns against you, transforming into a heavy, paralyzing lethargy designed to stop the performance by force. Every time you agree to a project you despise because refusal feels politically dangerous, you surrender a fragment of psychic tissue. The energy required to sustain a false self is drawn from the finite reservoir that fuels genuine desire, deep rest, and original thought. When you smile through an absurd meeting to preserve social standing or dilute your actual diagnosis to avoid conflict, the debt accumulates silently, compounding in the background. Søren Kierkegaard identified this same silent erosion in 1849. He warned that the most fatal despair is not loud or disruptive. It is the tranquil despair of the person who functions so smoothly that society considers them completely successful, while their inner core has quietly evaporated. You do not experience a dramatic breakdown. You simply evaporate. The drain is so gradual that most people mistake it for ordinary fatigue until the reservoir is completely empty. For 2,000 years, ancient thinkers maintained a specific architectural discipline against this trade, not through passive relaxation, but through deliberate structural refusal. Marcus Aurelius commanded the largest empire in the history of the Mediterranean world, while simultaneously fighting a multi-front war against Germanic tribes along the Danube River. He did not have the option of disconnecting. He did not have a quiet weekend available. He was surrounded continuously by court flatterers, corrupt provincial magistrates, incompetent generals, and the daily logistical pressure of administering an empire estimated at 60 million people across nearly 2 million square miles of territory. Yet in the dead of night, he opened his journal. The technology changes. The structural trap remains identical. Whether it is imperial court politics along the Danube or 60 urgent notifications vibrating in your pocket before sleep, the demand on your attention is infinite. Marcus Aurelius survived because he established a non-negotiable mental firewall. The Stoics called this central faculty of rational self-governance the hegemonikon, the commanding self. The innermost chamber that external conditions could reach the walls of, but could never breach without the occupant's consent. External obligations and social expectations are simply weather systems. They impact your schedule. They cannot touch your inner substance unless you voluntarily sign away the deed. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if thou wilt ever dig. Marcus Aurelius. Seneca delivered the colder, more surgical diagnostic from Rome around 49 AD, writing as someone who spent his career navigating high-stakes imperial politics. In On the Shortness of Life, he examined a universal pathology, our willingness to donate time, the only truly finite resource, to anyone who presents a polite justification for taking it. He observed Romans racing through the Forum at dawn, running between estates and dining with rivals. They guarded their money and land with iron locks and weapons, yet distributed their hours freely to every passing distraction. No promotion and no performance bonus reimburses the vital energy poured into someone else's quarterly slide deck. The currency you spend cannot be reprinted. The Stoic countermeasure was straightforward refusal, stopping the habit of trading inner substance for external praise. The Greek Stoics called this anachoresis, the deliberate retreat to an interior position that external chaos cannot penetrate. It is not escapism. It is the surgical practice of identifying what is genuinely yours and cutting off the tribute you pay to keep the peace. Everything we have diagnosed is structurally clear. The unresolved question is what it looks like when you walk back into the same building on Monday morning. You cannot repair a hollowed spirit by sleeping on the weekend. Sleep repairs the body. It does not reconstruct what the persona has consumed. The physics are different. You repair it by reclaiming territory. Specific, deliberate, non-negotiated reclamation, not as a therapeutic exercise, but as a structural intervention. This requires an immediate physical boundary, not a conceptual one. The distinction matters. A conceptual boundary is a statement about future intentions. A physical boundary is a changed condition in the material world that other people have to navigate around. The quiet practice begins tonight. It requires no apps, no purchases, and no special preparation. Start with a 5-minute microboundary. At 8 o'clock, disconnect every screen in the room. No podcasts, no background music, no notebook. Let the environment stay completely quiet. That slight initial discomfort is diagnostic evidence of how much artificial noise you use to drown out the inner silence. Once you master 5 minutes, expand the boundary toward 30. Minutes 8 through 15 will trigger an urge to reach for a phone or check an inbox. Observe the impulse without acting on it. It is merely the persona looking for an audience where none exists. The silence feels confrontational at first because the hollow has become audible. But behind that initial friction lies the steady return of your actual presence. Endure the silence. Keep the practice private. The moment you schedule it for display or post about it online, it becomes another performance, and the benefit evaporates. You do not need another vacation. You need yourself back, the core substance of who you were before you allowed outside expectations to define your worth. The archive remains open. The diagnosis is complete. The next logical study in this sequence, the Ghost Protocol, How to Operate Without Being Seen, is pinned on screen. The decision to inhabit your life starts